I've started to hear commentators describing more and more elite shooters' strokes as effortless. This is often the case with players like Steph Curry and Damian Lillard, and now Trae Young. Well, what exactly does effortless actually mean? It literally means that these guys don't have to put as much physical exertion into their shots from extremely deep range for the ball to still reach the basket. How is this possible, you might ask? NBA skills have so often seemed so far out of reach for the average basketball player like me. However, with the development of undersized elite shooting point guards like Steph Curry, and now an even shorter and thinner player in Trae Young, I hope that more and more people are realizing that the ability to shoot the ball from deep range is a skill that is attainable for many more people than, say, dunking is. The absolute number one reason why lies in what I call release timing. And in this breakdown, I'm going to show you how Trae Young's elite release timing, among other things, has allowed him to overcome the odds as an undersized 6'1 or 6'2 point guard who wasn't on any first-round draft boards at the beginning of the college basketball season. Here's Trae Young shooting in practice. As you can see, he barely even leaves the ground as he shoots from three-point range here, albeit high school three-point range. Notice how, as the ball reaches his set point, his feet are still in contact with the ground and his knees are still bent. Because of this, as he extends his right arm forward to push the ball up and forward, his legs are still able to generate force by extending and straightening, and importantly, pushing off the ground. Because his transfer of energy from his legs to his right arm is so efficient, he really doesn't have to jump off the ground more than, say, 2 inches from this range, despite the fact that he weighs a very normal 180 pounds. People often ask me in the comments how they can work on getting better release timing, and I'd say this in response. Just make sure that your feet are still in contact with the ground by the time that the ball reaches your set point. This will force you to have an earlier release relative to your jump, therefore increasing the transfer of energy from your legs to the ball. You might point out that Trae Young is only able to shoot without elevating like he does here because he's in practice. I'd respond by showing you the following footage from a game this year. Here, Young pulls up for a 3, maybe 5 feet beyond the men's collegiate three-point line, which is 20 feet and 9 inches from the basket. As you can see, he jumps significantly further off the ground here than he did in the previous video. He also jumps further forward than he did in the other video. Often, people think of the jump in jump shot to be for the purpose of elevation to avoid getting blocked by a taller contesting defender. This would necessitate that you get high off the ground before you release the ball, because the reason you're jumping in the first place is to increase the vertical height of the point of your release. I'd like to point out that the new purpose of the jump in jump shot with shooters like Trae Young, instead of being for elevation, this new jump is purely for the purpose of generating power. The key difference is that shooters like Trae Young release the ball before they even reach the apex of their jump, no matter the height of the jump. This means that, as Young increases the explosiveness and forward angle of his jump, he's doing very little to the actual vertical height of his release point, but rather he's just ramping up the power that he's transferring from his legs to his right arm. Even if he jumped 2 feet off the ground, it wouldn't matter, because the ball is long gone before he reaches the apex of his jump. The conclusion here is not to think of your jump as adding height, but rather as adding power. The other conclusion is that, no matter your height and stature, you can develop the ability to shoot the ball from deep by developing elite release timing. When Trae Young gets into the NBA, he will probably be the shooter with the deepest range, behind Steph Curry, meaning that the two players with the deepest consistent shooting range will be two of the smallest players in the NBA. If that doesn't give the average basketball player under 6 feet tall hope, then I don't know what will. In addition, by maintaining this early release relative to his jump, Young maintains a quick jump shot, something that is especially important for someone his size. I'd like to point out that in a mid-range situation, things change. Because you're closer to the hoop, the power from your legs becomes far less important. Your shooting arm, tricep, and shoulder have enough power to push the ball to the hoop on their own. This is why it's possible to be a good mid-range shooter with late release timing relative to your jump, like we saw with players like Michael Jordan. Remember though, that Jordan wasn't a good 3-point shooter by today's standards. Also, in mid-range situations, you're more likely to be closely guarded than if you're standing, say, 25 feet from the hoop. This means that the need for a higher release point height becomes important, and you're more likely to have to shoot over people. Even in the case of the mid-range shot, however, players with the very quickest releases, like Steph Curry, don't have to elevate because they can just shoot so quickly that contesting defenders can't reach up in time to block their shot. This is just something that you will have to figure out on your own over time, and it depends on how quickly you're able to perform your release while still maintaining consistency in your shot. Moving back to Trae Young, I want to talk about something that has become more commonly understood in the basketball community thanks to people like ProShot, among others, and that is the turn. The turn simply refers to the slight turn away from the shooting side that all of the best shooters in history have displayed. You can either think of it as turning the feet to point to the left of the basket for right-handed shooters, or turning the shoulders to the left of the basket. But either way, the actual reason for turning, like this, is to allow for the shooting side shoulder to experience less tension throughout the shooting motion. Trae Young is a player who barely turns at all when he shoots. As you can see from the earlier shot, he does realign his body as he prepares to shoot by placing his right foot ever so slightly in front of his left foot, therefore forcing his shoulders to turn slightly to the left as well. You can see that he's turned here because our angle of view is behind the parallel line to Young, but we can still see the Oklahoma writing on the front side of his jersey when he shoots. People are often confused as to how much they should turn when they shoot, and unfortunately, I can't give anyone the answer. This is because some people like Young barely turn at all, and others like Isaiah Thomas turn a large amount when they shoot. The only way you can find what works for you is to practice different amounts of turn for yourself to find what feels comfortable. If nothing feels comfortable, then it might be worth trying something that Young does a little, which is to turn while in mid-air. If we compare his body angle relative to us, from when he takes off to when he lands, you can see that he's rotated ever so slightly while in the air. This might be useful for people who aren't comfortable bringing the ball to their set point while being turned, but still understand the importance of implementing an off-center body angle during the release of the ball. Finally, in terms of technique, I'd like to point out that Young does not display vertical joint alignment in his shooting arm at his set point. As you can see from this front angle of his free throws, his right arm is angled slightly inward, such that his wrist lies inside the vertical plane of his elbow and shoulder, and his hand does not lie at the exact center point underneath the ball. For those of you who missed my previous video, I went into some close detail about the different results of differing shooting arm joint alignments, and if you're interested in seeing more about that, then I'd highly recommend that you guys go watch that video now, which I've linked in the description. Finally, I know that you guys watch this channel to see my analytical approach to shooting technique, and I'm going to stick with that formula here on this channel. But if you're interested in seeing if I practice what I preach, then I'd appreciate if you would follow my new Instagram page, where I'm going to be uploading some of my own shooting videos, as well as some extra advice that you won't be seeing on this channel. Either way, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.